All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. We thank you so much for joining the House of Shiloh Ministries today on Yah's holy day of the week, the Shabbat. We thank you so much for taking time out to join us today. We thank Yah that we are here all together virtually to enjoy each other's presence and learn together once again on this holy day. We're going to continue our lesson in part 19 of Now What to Do After You Learn the Truth. This lesson is sponsored by the House of Shiloh Ministries and presented by yours truly, Brother Andrew Bradley. The previous lesson, part 18, we finished up really focusing on scriptures from the Old and New that prove that scriptures are all written to the Israel, the audience of Israel. And really, when we do that, it really removes the argument that other people claim what Israel is. For example, they'll say Israel is spiritual. And one of the reasons why they can say that is because they believe the audience is to a group of people who are not Israel. And thus everybody can be included, whoever believes and so on. Well, that's not the case. So what we're going to do today in 19 is to demonstrate this. So let's move on to the next slide and go into our next section of this, proving that Israel is relevant. We've already talked about how Israel is eternal. That's in the previous section. And we've talked about the scriptures state this, how it states it many times, but, the church really doesn't teach this right or doesn't pay attention to it, thinking it's irrelevant because, again, they believe Israel is spiritual. Mm-hmm. We've already discussed the Torah is eternal, and if the Torah and the covenant are eternal, then how can Israel be spiritual? It's important for them to disconnect the covenants and Torah, because really the idea of Israel now being spiritual contradicts a lot of what we've already read about the Torah and the covenant. Because the Torah was given to a specific people, and the covenants, which go hand in hand with Torah, you can't be in the covenant if you're not obeying Torah, was only given to a particular people. So we're gonna clarify that. So this section will focus on scriptures that prove that Israel has no end. They're eternal. They are eternal. And that the people of Israel are the bloodline of 12 tribes, not a spiritual replacement. That's a very important, because again, predominantly the church believes this. And that's why you have other nations saying, I'm Israel too, I'm Israel too. Even though they're Torah observant and Messianic, meaning they believe in Messiah, they still believe they're part of the 12 tribes now, which doesn't make sense from what we've already read. So let's begin our proofreading by going to the original scriptures, or what they call the Old Testament. Let's begin that on the next slide, please. All right. We're going to start off in Isaiah again, and I think it's important for us to understand. Isaiah is a huge section that really clarifies who salvation is for and the end times when it comes to in relation to Israel and Judah. So let's continue. We got Isaiah 45 and 17. Let's begin with a big one. But Israel shall be saved in YAHUAH with an everlasting salvation. Ye shall not be ashamed nor confounded, a world without end. So the salvation of Israel will be everlasting. All right? Future tense. With and everlasting. Shall be saved. It's future tense. So when the salvation came through our Messiah, why would it be a spiritual one? Why it didn't say it is. And it's talking about the very salvation that Yahusha brought us. And without end, of course, is eternal. Now, the thing is, the word world has in the Greek New Testament at least 4 or 5 different words. And we have a lesson that speaks on who salvation is for, and it defines the word world in its many forms. But this helps us understand how the Bible's language references the world as Israel. And that's important because a lot of the Christians believe that salvation came to the whole world. But in the Bible, whenever the word world is typically used, it's referencing Israel. Okay? Mm-hmm. So is the state of Israel today because we're talking about future now. They're talking about Israel spiritual, Israel this or Israel that. But according to prophecy, here, this is a prophecy, has what we see in Israel received, have been saved, what we see today in the state of Israel. We can't say that. No, we can't, because there is no peace surrounding that state. And it doesn't line up with other prophecies where Yahuwah says he's going to gather his people who have been scattered by his hand a second time, and Judah from the four corners of the earth. And when he does that, there will not be any enemies around. There'll be peace. And we don't see that in Israel today. All right? So we know that the everlasting salvation, the end result, the fullness of that has not come yet as a nation, as people, where they're gathered together in the homeland again. We haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen that yet. So we know then that, one, Israel's eternal. We've just seen it here. There's no end to it. And their salvation will be eternal, what the salvation that they're going to receive. So we know that the state of Israel that we see now aren't the people, so they don't match up. So I don't give a care who you are outside of the 12 tribes genetically. If you say that you look like the state of Israel and believe what they believe, or you believe in Torah and the Messiah, and you think you fall in line just fine with what the tribes should be perceived as, if you haven't been with the rest of the parts of this lesson, then you know, then you need to go back and look, because it's going to show you that that's not the case. The people were specific in the way they looked. There was no flexibility around that. People tried to incorporate flexibility, but it wouldn't make sense. According to Torah, it wouldn't make sense. And according to the historical reasons, it wouldn't make sense. So let's continue speaking to this concept, to what we want to prove, that Israel is eternal, on the next slide as well. All right? All right. Minister White, do you mind reading for me, please? Okay. We're going to start some reading and keep talking about Israel is eternal.
Okay, Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 12 through 14. Therefore prophesy and say unto them, Thus saith Adonai YAHUAH, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves, and cause you to come up out of your graves, and bring you into the land of Israel. And ye shall know that I am YAHUAH, when I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves, and shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Then shall ye know that I, YAHUAH, have spoken it, and performed it, saith YAHUAH.
All right. This prophecy follows the vision of the dry bones, okay? And this was during the Babylonian exile, all right? I just want to make sure we understand that, okay? But we're not done reading yet. Before we continue in Ezekiel, because I want to keep reading this, does anybody have anything to say or add so far?
I think we're good.
All right, let's continue in Ezekiel. We got to read this section, this chapter, because to get the whole story. Brother, can you read Ezekiel 37, 15 through 18, please?
Yes, sir, yes. Ezekiel 37, 15 through 18. The word of Yahuwah came again unto me, saying, Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it, for Judah and for the children of Yasharel his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Yasharel his companions, and join them one to another unto one stick, and they shall become one in thine hand. And then the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, Wilt thou shew us what thou meanest by these?
All right. Thank you, brother. So we're not done. I want to keep reading. Right now we're talking about Yahuwah bringing back all of Israel himself. And they won't be separated anymore. It won't be two sticks. He's going to bring them both together. So let's continue to the next slide to finish or to complete some of our thoughts here.
Mm-hmm.
Sister Billy, you mind reading Ezekiel 37:19 through 21?
Sure. Say unto them, Thus saith Adonai Yahuwah, Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in mine hand. And the sticks whereon thou writest shall be in thine hand before their eyes. And say unto them, Thus said Adonai Yahuwah, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and bring them into their own land.
All right, thank you, sister.
Mm-hmm.
So let's think about this. What tribes are supposedly in Israel today? When you talk to the Ashkenaz, most of them will say, well, they're going to be Ashkenaz or Sephardic. Those are the two main groups. Most of them will say Judah only. So how has this prophecy come to pass? Because the way they treat the state of Israel is that this has happened. This gathering has happened. But it doesn't make sense. They can't even account for all the tribes, right? And they only will acknowledge one, maybe two, but mainly one, because of course they want the Judah tribe because that's the governing tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So Israel is all 12 tribes, and all are not present in the promised land as we speak. So my question is this: if you look, why are these heathen here? All right, to mislead you to think that only the heathen, non-believers, has Israel, because they're gathering them from the heathen, right? The non-believer, because you got to understand that this word heathen is goy, the same word used for Gentile and nation. So why use heathen? The word goy is usually translated as Gentile. If Gentile was used, then you would know that the world has Israel in their possession. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to people?
Mm-hmm.
So by saying the heathen only, it is pointing to, because the definition of a heathen is a non-believer pagan. It says that it's the people who don't believe, or the pagan who has possession of Israel. But that's not true. We know, according to the true Hebraic language, that it was the Gentile or the other nations, which are supposed to be there, that had nations who were not Israel, that had all the tribes. So the point I'm making is, if it's just the heathen, then what? What, China only? Or somewhere in Mexico somewhere, the heathen? No, that doesn't even make sense. It's the Gentile or the other nations who had Israel as a whole. And I don't want people to be misled by an English, purposeful misleading of an English translation. This is not an error. This is done in purpose. It was never just the heathen. It was all nations outside of Israel that had the risk of being the ones who had Yah's people. And all you got to do is look at the globe if you're willing to admit who we really are. And you'll see we're in every one of those Gentile nations, every other nation. All right? Everybody follow. So far, we're talking about the nations being brought together, all the tribes being brought together. That has not happened yet, because you don't see it in Israel, and they don't even admit to it. We already also know that what we see in Israel, and this is from the previous sections of this lesson, do not match the historical description of the Semitic people. Of any Semitic people, not just Israel, because Hebrews are a particular group of Semitic. They're not all Semitic. But the historical Semitic look was always of a brown to dark brown, curly to woolly hair. And you definitely don't see that in the state of Israel. Okay? Everybody's following me, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Can I
So
make?
let's continue to the next one. Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
I wanted to know if I can make an observation, please. Even though we don't
Please.
have to go back, I wanted to reread again, just to highlight a point. Ezekiel, still verse 37, going back to verse 14. He says, "And I shall put my ruach in you, and you shall live, and I shall place you in your own land." I shall place you in your own land. This implies that Israel has a land, has a location on this globe, on this planet, that is theirs, says Yah, right? Israel has their own land. Excuse me, please. So when you think about verse 14, where he says, "I'm going to put my ruach in you and place you in your own land," and then you look at verse 21, still Ezekiel 37, verse 21. 21 says this: "Thus says, Adonai Yahuwah, behold, I would take the children of Yasharal from among the heathen, whether they be gone." So it's saying that the children of Yasrael has gone somewhere. How can this apply to other people when they are already in their own land? The other people are already in their own land. It is Israel who have been dispersed, who are the diaspora, who are not in their own land. They are scattered. They call it the scattered tribes. This is why they have to be gathered, because they have been scattered. Right? So he says, wherever they have gone, I'm going to gather them from on every side and do what? Bring them into their own land. How can this revelation belong to other nations, other individuals outside of Israel? That means that the land that Yah has for Israel would belong to the world. You understand what I'm saying? If this revelation is for the whole world, then the land that Yah says he's going to take us back to, that is part of our salvation, right? That's part of our salvation. That means that everyone has access to that land, including Israel. It's not their land only, but it's anyone that claims this birthright, and this is a birthright. Okay, I just wanted to highlight that, Brother Andrew.
No, that's a good point. Very good point. What I think what's going to support what you said is actually the next slide.
Oh, okay.
So let's move to the next slide so we can get more specific with who we're really dealing with. And I'll have Sister Lily read this for me, please.
Mm-hmm.
Okie dokes. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all, and they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will save them out of all of their dwelling places wherein they have sinned, and I will cleanse them, so shall they be my people, and I will be their Elohim. And David my servant shall be king over them, and they shall have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments, and observe my statutes, and do them.
All right. Well, that's pretty. This is pretty specific because one, Yahuwah is saying they will no longer defile themselves anymore with their idol. That's gone.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they will be perfectly obedient. Now, there's some history to Judaism that you all we don't talk about in this lesson, but I will just speak on it and let you all reach out and do your own research. Judaism, before it being called that, was commonly known as Talmudism. Talmudism. And that is the oral law that was practiced by the the early believers, the early Hebraic people that came out of Babylon. The Talmud was created by the dispersed of Israel coming out of Babylon. It's not a Masoretic Jew or the white Jew that we see today. Not to be offensive, but it's not necessarily their creation. It was already created before they came around. It was one of the problems that our Messiah had. And the Judaism or Phariseeism was Talmudism when it first was created. And they did a lot of things in that stuff, a lot of unnecessary stuff. And they brought some form of idol worship, and they didn't. A lot of them didn't realize that this stuff was considered idol worship. But they did pick up behaviors that they picked up out of Babylon. They were there for at least 70 years. They were there for quite some time. So they picked up some bad habits. Some of them, not all, but some of them. Mm-hmm. And they became a major voice during the life of Yahushua. So we have Judaism now in the state of Israel practicing Talmudism. Because I'll tell you now, they treasure the Talmud. It's very valuable to them. They study the Talmud like they study Torah. They will argue with you with the Talmud more than they would Torah, because Torah speaks to the people, the original people. It's there. But they spend more time in the Talmud, and the Talmud speaks very poorly of us and the Messiah. So there's some issues there, and that's why it's important to know that they will no longer defile themselves. So the fact that Judaism is in the land is a problem. It doesn't match up with this prophecy. And then they will walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them. We know from talking previously that judgments come by the law. All right. The law, Torah, is the witness against us, either good or bad. It's our judgment. It's the tool of judgment. That's what Yah is going to measure us up to. All right. Everybody following so far? Anybody want to add anything?
I'd like to add an observation. If
Yes, ma'am.
if the Jewish ones in the state of Israel were the original people, and if they were what you say, fulfilling Ezekiel 37, then Israel would not be one of the largest homosexual countries in the world. One of the largest. That type of behavior, I won't say it that way, would not be allowed. It wouldn't even be practiced, because it just said here that their transgressions are the things that are detestable, which is an abomination in the eyes of the Most High, wouldn't even be happening in the land right now. So that's another indication that who's in the land today are not the authentic or the original people that Ezekiel 37 is talking about, because of the practices that are taking place in the land. If true Israel were in the land on Shabbat, everything would be shut down. No businesses would be functioning. There would be no tourism on Shabbat. The city would, for lack of a better term, be dead. It would be still. There would be rest. So just knowing a little bit, it clearly shows you that those that are in the land today are imposters. They are imposters. Thank you, Brother Andrew.
They don't match up. Yes, ma'am. They don't match up.
Sister Lily has a question, please. No, I'm sorry. Sister Billy has a question, please.
So you mentioned earlier that they go based off the Talmud. So the Talmud is not when they speak of the Torah, they're not talking about the Torah. They're talking about the Talmud.
No, they're two different things.
Oh, they're two different.
When they speak of the Torah, they speak of the Torah. When they speak of the Talmud, they speak of the Talmud. And the Talmud has very harsh things in it. They consider black skin a curse
from Ham
in the Talmud. They consider Yahusha, worthy of death. In fact, I think they term it where he'll be boiling in a pit of excrement in damnation, to be specific. That's how they think of Yahusha. The Talmud is very harsh.
Mhm.
It does not speak to us very well, even though in the Talmud, it does speak to the original Israel being dark complected, dark brown. And it's in their Talmud, but they won't share that. I've actually read it. Tried to get a copy of it so I could share it with you all, but I couldn't get a suitable copy like I normally do sometimes. But even in their own Talmud, it speaks to the color and complexion of the Semitic people, which is brown and dark brown. But they ignore that completely.
And bear in mind, when they say black skin, that means any variation of brown. That's what that means. That means it includes you, me, any variation.
Yep, from light brown
from light brown to dark brown. Any variation of brown, anywhere where there is any melanin is included in that category according to the Talmud. Yeah.
And you know what's really sad? To tell you how they don't, it goes against reason. The brown complected skins of the world, not only do they age quite well, but they age well in the sun. And it's obvious even to those races who don't have the melanin that black melanin, darker melanization do that. But yet they will call the skin color inferior. But yet it's the skin color that's best suited for the environments of the world, especially Israel. And Israel's had a major skin cancer problem for decades. They're the second highest skin cancer rate in the world. Why? Because you have a people who aren't from there living in a country that is a sun-baked country.
Mm-hmm.
Sun-baked. But, I guess I can use that reasoning. I don't know why they don't. Well, I do know why. They just don't want to admit it. But it just doesn't make sense. It's right there in your face.
Mm-hmm.
Billy, you have anything else, Billy?
No, that was it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I make one more observation, please?
Yes,
it says in verse 22, I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all. Notice it said one king is king to them all, not one king is king to the world. So Yahusha is not the king over the world. Yahusha is the king of Israel. As a matter of fact, was that not written on the top of the cross? Did they not say, this is your king?
Mm-hmm.
This is your king. Rome was like, this is not our king. This is your king. So Ezekiel is also confirming that point. This is the king of the children of Israel. This is not the king for the whole world, but he's our king. Thank you, Brother Andrew.
That's right.
And also, another point is, instead of it being for the whole world, it makes it very clear that I'm coming to gather my people from the four corners of the earth. Well, if he's going to gather everybody, then he would need to gather a certain people. He would just gather the whole world. So would in fact, why would they be a gathering?
True.
if the whole world is involved in this.
When you read,
he makes it very clear, my people, my people, my people. Mm-hmm. How many times do you hear that running through the Bible, my people that are called by my name? If you use the Hebrew names, you will hear his name in the word YAHUAH, Yisrael. You will hear his name. But if you call us Jews, then you won't hear his name.
Mm-hmm.
Call us by the right name and you will know that we are his children.
Hence the reason for the name change. This is where all the names are changed in the Bible. All the names of the people in the Bible, those names have been changed, except for the ones of the false gods. They got to keep their names.
Yeah, they get to keep their name.
Yeah,
And
Ashtaroth
we
still has
talked
her
about
name.
in the earlier, and we talked about in the earlier lessons how the slaves that they brought over, according to the slave ledgers, not my data, from the actual ledgers that you can get from certain websites to see what their names were. And many of the slave names were named after Yahuwah. Same Hebraic practice that was done during the times of David, all these prophets, everybody. And the reason why, another point too, is this: reading Isaiah, reading Ezekiel, reading Jeremiah, you understand why the Christian church teaches the New Testament only, New Testament only, New Testament only, because they can twist Paul's letters. You can't twist these prophecies because they're very specific. But Isaiah talks about the Messiah saving his people, coming for his people. We're reading right now in Ezekiel 37, for his people, for my people, not the world. So they have to separate the books, saying, oh, that was old. Now he's changed his mind into something new. That's what you're arguing with them about.
True.
You know, it makes no sense.
And if you're wondering how can, if the person is asking, well, how can I identify who his people are? Go back to Genesis. Go back to Genesis when Yahweh is having a conversation with Abraham. And when he tells him, no, I know Ishmael is was your first son, but my covenant is going to be with Isaac. It is through his seed also that this covenant is going to be made. Not the whole world, not every nation under the sun, not even Ishmael, which is what Abraham wanted. He says, oh, that Ishmael may live before you. He says, I will bless him. He's your seed. I will bless him. But the covenant is with Isaac and his seed, not Isaac and the spiritual world or spiritual people who say that we're Israel because we have converted or we believe in what you believe in. Now that makes us Isaac's seed. When you look that up, he's saying Isaac's seed of the flesh first, and then those who obey second. But it needs those two pieces as a qualifier, not just one. Well, we obey, but we're not of the seed, disqualified. Well, we're of the seed and we don't obey, disqualified. Both of those will disqualify you if you're only doing one or the other. You must be of the flesh, of the seed of Isaac, in whom it is called, and you must also be an obedient one to his judgments, which are written here, his statutes, his commandments, to observe them, to do them. Now, Yah has accepted you as being part of that remnant. So I just wanted to highlight that, Brother Andrew.
Oh, no, I agree with you completely. One of the things that we have to understand, we know that he has a specific people, and Yahuwah does not lie. He's speaking of future prophecy here. Why all of a sudden will he be made a liar? He's not mentioning any spiritual Israel here. He's specifically talking to a people. And if you really want to know where the people are at, remember, as long as Torah is relevant, the curses of Torah are relevant, meaning the curses you fall under for disobedience. So show me the people who line up with the curses. There is, I don't give a care how much you twist the Holocaust. I don't give a care. Yes, I'm not denying that there was some tragedy for the Jewish communities during World War II. I'm not going to deny that. But for it to be considered part of the curses, no. No, because what the original people, the true people of Israel suffered, the Holocaust, that brief blimp in time, can't hold a finger. It shouldn't even be compared. And that's what a lot of Jewish people will say. Yes, we are people of Deuteronomy 28, because look at the Holocaust. That was a wartime act, an act of evil in wartime. That was not being sold into slavery. That was not going into bondage for 400 years. That was not being hung out like strange fruit or being raped and destroyed and starved and mutilated. All those things are in the curses. The consequences of Yah not being present with his people, that didn't happen during the Holocaust. Not that little brief history.
And Brother Andrew, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Minister.
Oh, I was going to say that's the purpose of the DNA test. I mean, you think they don't know who we really are based on our blood types and our blood tests? So you want to know who the people in YAHUAH? Ask the scientists that create the DNA test. They know.
And we talked about that in earlier lessons.
Exactly.
They do know. I wanted to mention that the atrocity, because anytime you're taking mass life, it's an atrocity. Whether it's our lives, Hebrews' lives, or some other individuals, it's still an atrocity. So what the Jewish people suffered in the time of war was POW, prisoners of war. And that is not peculiar to them. It's not that they can't claim exclusivity for that, because that is the nature of war, right? Those are the things that happened in war.
Americans were taking hostage.
I'm sorry?
That's correct.
Americans were taking hostages, and they were not. And bear in mind, during that time of the war, it was not just Jewish people being killed. It was not just so. It wasn't just peculiar. It wasn't a war against Jewish people, and only they were annihilated. No, there were other people too.
French, Austria.
Yes.
There was prisoner camps in the Pacific. During the Pacific campaign, Japan had some of those most brutal prison camps. They were brutal because they weren't just in prison. These people were tortured and starved to death on purpose. The Japanese prison camps were brutal. So you're right. It wasn't just exclusive to the Jews.
True, it was
the
war.
Jews happened to be in the middle of Germany, at the heart of all of it. And of course, they felt the blunt of it pretty early in the war and throughout the war until Germany fell. So we understand that. They may also say, well, we got persecuted. We've been persecuted as Jews for centuries. Well, this is what I will say to this. You still don't match up with Deuteronomy 28. One, your people are very wealthy. They were wealthy before World War I and World War II. They did very well in the countries they lived in. That does not line up with Deuteronomy 28.
True.
Secondly, if you're going to claim to be somebody, you're going to get a little taste of what it is to really be them. So if you want to be Judah or any of the 12 tribes, then don't think you're going to get the benefit and not get a little taste of what it's like to be them for real. So don't sit here and ask to be me and think there's not a price. Just be fortunate you didn't pay the real price. Because as a grown man, I still pay the price whenever I walk into a store or deal with anyone in public. I'm conscious of who I am. The Jew doesn't have to do that. So when I hear arguments like that, I just shake my head, because they cannot prove, they do not match up with Scripture. They do not match up with DNA, which we talked about in the early sections of this lesson. They do not.
And remember, the curse is to be a slave, not a prisoner of war.
Right.
The curse is to be a slave. And even they can have to admit they have never been slaves. They've been prisoners. They've been tortured. They have experienced the atrocities of war like other people have. But they have not been slaves.
I was going to say that my stepdad used to tell me, hey, you boys already have a strike against this world, and that's because you got family. And you were born with a strike already.
That is true. Thank you, Brother
We
Andrew.
didn't hear his point.
He says his grandfather mentioned to him that they should walk circumspectly, because when they were born with melanin in their skin, which was already a strike against them.
Yeah. Yeah. I teach my kids, I make them aware of their complexion so they can be proud. But I also know there's a price to pay for them. Yeah. So let's move to the next slide here, and let's continue. So we're just gonna finish up talking about 22 through 24. So as you were saying, they're gonna have one king over them, and that's King David. But King David was dead at this time. He was dead before they got exiled to Babylon. So we're referencing the line of David, and we know who changes the line of David. Our Messiah did. And we just said judgments and statutes are only found in Torah. And this is a future tense statement, and they shall also walk in my judgments. So my question is, if what we see in Israel is the true Israel, do they walk in the Torah? Do they walk in Yahuwah's judgments and statutes? Or do they still defile themselves with their idols? Because I want them to know, I want the audience to understand that what we see in Israel is not Israel. That the Israel is eternal, but it's just not them. Okay? All right, so let's move to the next slide, and let's see if this is the case. Are they really, just by their behaviors alone, are they obeying Torah? One of the Jewish idols that we see very popular, very common, is the Star of David. By the way, this is David, never was David's star, but that's what they call it. Adopted as a symbol for Jews and their reign in the 17th century. So you know this is not Hebraic, just by the dates alone. In the 19th century, it became popular in Eastern Europe. Of course, another area that's not Hebraic. And by the end of World War I, it became internationally accepted as a symbol of the Jewish people. So how can this be Hebraic and scripture when the original people didn't make the symbol at all? And the original use of the Star of David was for mystical purposes by Muslims and medieval Jews. And you can see that in the Star of David Wikipedia research. This is proudly displayed by the Jewish people. And it would have never been the case as a people, as a nation. This is an idolatrous symbol. All right? To represent a people not according to Scripture. Now, I believe Minister White will have something to add to this.
I'm chomping at the bit.
Go right ahead, because I know you know something about this symbol.
I wanted to just highlight the point that you just made, and that is this became an acceptance of the Star of David. How many hundreds of years after King David died? How many hundreds of years was this created after his death? So how can it be David's star if this happened hundreds of years later? That's the first thing I wanted to bring up. And the next thing I'd like to point out is this. In the scriptures, it says Yahushua is reprimanding Israel for worshiping other gods and for bringing their gods with them, even when they came out of Egypt. So this is like the star of Moloch or Molech, depends on how you want to enunciate it. And it's mentioned in the scripture, and I think it's called the Star of Remphan. Have you all heard that before?
No.
Oh, you have? Okay, yes. So if you read about that in the scripture, our Messiah is reprimanding Israel for doing this type of idolatry. So the Star of Remphan, the Star of Molech, is what we're looking at right now. This is not David's star. This belongs to an idol. This belongs to an idol. So this star is definitely It's definitely the property of the Jewish people, but it is not for Israel.
That's right.
Excuse me.
That's right. And if you look at Moses, you'll see statues or pictures of Moses. You'll see that star above him. Or somewhere in his image, you'll see that very same star. And that pagan god was a problem for Israel for many, many centuries. They just, our ancestors just would not listen. Just had to go after somebody else.
Well, King David died in 970 BC.
Mm-hmm.
Century was that versus the 17th century. That was a long time difference.
Mm-hmm.
That's 17th centuries, 19th centuries. The time before you come up with this star.
Mm-hmm.
23 centuries. No, 26 centuries.
Wow,
Yeah,
it took that long to find the star. It took a long time to find this star, huh?
Mm. And it didn't get found until the wrong people showed up.
On the wrong land.
Go figure that.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Yep.
Yeah. There's the wrong place at the wrong time, the wrong people.
Exactly. So let's look at another idol the Jews love to worship. The Wailing Wall. This right here is, I don't even know how you can associate this with the true people of Israel. The Wailing Wall, said to be the last remaining part of the old temple. Now, if this was true, this would make Yahushua a liar in Matthew 24:2, where he says not one stone, not a single stone will be unturned. When he referenced the temple and the king and the condition that Jerusalem was going to be in when it fell in 70 AD. The wall is actually the remains of the Roman Antonia fortress. It is a piece of that, and it's very clear. I'm going to show you on a map where it's actually located. But they come to this wall and reverence it as a temple because they long for the temple to be rebuilt to try to get prophecy fulfilled, because the temple's supposed to be rebuilt when the kingdom is restored and all that stuff. And they come to this wall and they bow their heads and pray to it. This is foolishness. It's not Torah. It's not directed by Yahuwah to do it. This is a Jewish practice. Something the Jewish people have done, adding their own commands, statutes, their own Talmud to their way of life. Yahuwah never would have told them to do this. He didn't tell them to do this.
True.
At all. Is it really? So think about it. Is it scripture to buy your head? It is. It isn't, of course. Let's look before I ask questions. Let's move to the next slide, just so I can show you where the Wailing Wall is. So this is an overhead view of the temple and fortress location. All right. The Wailing Wall was not part of the original temple. So look, you see the temple to the left. All right, that's where the temple is at. The fortress, the Roman fortress, is to the right, and that's the Wailing Wall in the north part of the map. They over there bowing down to a Roman fortress wall.
That's hilarious.
It is. It just makes no sense.
That's very, very funny.
Okay.
And the sad part is, it don't take much to discover that this is the case, but they don't want to know this truth. And just like we see many in the church who would, I had a gentleman that told me today that if we say that works are required for salvation, we say that Yahushua died for no reason. So when I quoted Revelations 22, where it says that all the dead and all men will be judged according to their works, he goes and says, well, not all works are salvation. And it didn't even make sense. It's not even scripture how he replied. But the point I'm making, it doesn't matter if it's in the book or not. If this is what they believe, they'll find a way to justify it in their own circle. Many people do not come to you to learn. They come to disprove, even if what they believe in is dogma. This right here is nowhere near in the scripture. It doesn't match the orientation of where the temple and Jerusalem sat, how it sat on that mount. It's an elevated place too. It's not easy to get to this. It was not easy for Rome to destroy this location. The way it sits is actually elevated, almost like on a mountainside or something, or a big hill.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have at the southern area that looks like a slope with all those little rectangle pieces, because it's elevated. That's why the Romans put the fortress there. It was a perfect spot right next to the temple. Tells you how much they cared about that, right? But they're working a wall from the temple. Anybody want to add to this?
I wanted to give the scripture for that star that I was making mention of. It's in Amos. It's in chapter 5, Amos chapter 5. And it's you can start in verse 25 and go through verse 27. And it reads, this is Amos 5, verses 25, verse through 27. Have you offered unto me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness 40 years, O house of Israel? But you have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, your Chuyun, your images, the star of your God, which you made to yourselves. Therefore will I cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, saith YAHUAH, whose name is YAHUAH of hosts. So this Star of David image is something that is created by them, not by the Most High. And one more thing is, you said that people who don't in general don't come to discuss for learning, but they come to disprove. One of the main reasons people come to disprove what it is that you say is because they have to do that for them to maintain in what they think and what they say. So they have to pull down and negate what you're saying so that they can stand firm in their own era. That's the reason they fight so hard. They don't want to change, and they're not there to learn. Sister Lily has a comment or a question.
I was just going to say that it's also in Acts 7, verse 43. It says, yeah, you took up the tabernacle of Molech and the star of your Elohim, Remphan, figures which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond
Babylon. You see?
Isn't that something? The New Testament author is quoting the Old.
Go figure, right?
Yeah, ain't that something? I thought this was the New Covenant. It's amazing how the New Covenant must have the Old to survive.
True.
I tell you, it's right in your face. Anybody else have anything? That's a great point. Thank you, Sister Lily and Minister White. Let's move to the next one. We're going to continue in Ezekiel. I'll go ahead and read this one. And this is 25:26. Again, we're just continuing Ezekiel. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given unto Jacob, my servant. Not the world, not a spiritual entity, wherein your fathers have dwelt. And they shall dwell therein. Not a spiritual one. Even they and their children and their children's children forever. Boy, he made that point pretty blunt, didn't he? He put some emphasis on that. And my servant David shall be their prince forever. He's telling you, my word, Yahushua, will be your king and prince forever, your captain forever. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace. We don't see that right now, do we? With them.
No.
It shall be an everlasting covenant with them,
Mm-hmm.
and I will place them
Mm-hmm.
and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forevermore. That's part of the prophecy they're trying to force now, building the third sanctuary. But the point is, look how specific this is. But the biggest point in these two verses is that there's a covenant of peace.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Israel was gathered, according to Ezekiel, there would not be wars or anything around Israel impacting them at this moment. None. Right now, Israel's hated, absolutely hated by most of the world, especially that region of the world, and they're in constant threat of being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
But what was once given and dwelt in shall be restored back to Israel forever.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And Yahushua will be our captain, prince, high priest, leader, king, everything, forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sanctuary will be in the midst of Israel forever. And this has not been done. Yah doesn't do things out of sequence. Yah doesn't do things that don't make sense. He said the covenant of peace will come first, then the sanctuary. So how are they pushing to get this third sanctuary built when they're always in threat of having some random bomb coming over a wall somewhere? So
Yeah.
if the servant of David, which is Yahushua, the king and the high priest of the new kingdom that's coming,
Mm-hmm.
is to be over Israel forever, then how can Christianity replace this? How can there be a spiritual? Because they want to misinterpret Paul's letter? Paul's own words? That's what they're doing. And I get worked up about it because you constantly got to speak to this about them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just won't read the Old Testament to see that this can't be the case.
You know, Brother Andrew, when this
Anybody
happens,
want
yes, thank you. When this takes place in Ezekiel 37 that you're elaborating on, there is that peace that's with Israel, which means that Israel's enemies, although Israel will be surrounded by her enemies, none will be able to come up against her and survive it. This is why Israel will be at peace, because Yah is going to ensure that no one or no thing can overcome them again. They will always have peace, which is why in Acts chapter 1, verse 6, the Hebrews, which were the disciples, which were the apostles, they asked Yahusha in Acts chapter 1, verse 6, when they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Adonai, will you at this time restore again the kingdom of Yasharel? Again. How can other nations say that they were a part of this unless they were a part of it to begin with? Because remember, this says restore again, which means they should have been a part of the first kingdom, the first time when Yasharel ruled. So if they weren't a part of it the first time when Yasharel ruled, how will they be a part of it this last time when Yasharel shall rule again? This is not a spiritual Israel. This is the seed. This is true Yasharel, the ones that were in the beginning. This is Jacob's seed. This is Isaac's children. This is Jacob's children. Okay, I just wanted to highlight that.
Nope, I agree with you. Anybody else? We're going to do one more verse, I believe, and we'll end Ezekiel and finish this section of the lesson up. This part 19. If not, we'll go ahead and read the next one here. I'll read it since we're finishing up here. And then Yahuwah, this is Yahuwah still speaking. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Yea, I will be their ally, and they shall be my people. And the heathen shall know that I, Yahuwah, do sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary shall be in the midst of them forevermore. Now, heathen here, again, we spoke about it earlier, is really Goy, which should be nation. And this is purposely misinterpreted because it wants you to think that the heathen, the non-believers, will know. But no, you think Yah's going to show up and just show it to the heathen. The whole world isn't going to know that Yahuwah has sanctified, separated, made Israel unique to all nations. So that should be nations, not just the heathen. In that case, that could be quite a small audience. What are you going to do? The heathens of what? Where? At that time, it could be some small group in the Northwest. Who is the heathen? According to Christianity, I'm talking about. So we know that this is really speaking to nations, all the nations that surround Israel, like just said. So to say that the Gentile will know that Israel is separated from them would prove that salvation is for Israel only. That's the reason why they say heathen. Because if you say, listen to how it will sound now, and the Gentile shall know that I, Yahuwah, do sanctify Israel. What does that do now? That includes everybody that's not Israel. And now, and that would separate the two groups. The world, all the rest of the world and Israel would be clearly separated by the language. But they couldn't do that because they don't want to exclude all the world. They only want to exclude the unbeliever, the pagan.
True.
That's why this is a purposeful misdirection. All right? And we see that sanctified means kadash, which is to be set apart, be consecrated. So only Israel is set apart under the rulership of Yahusha, the servant of Yahuwah. And we're not talking about a spiritual existence. And it did not include anybody else but them. Nothing else but them. So there is no spiritual. Why all of a sudden would Paul have the authority to change the purpose of Yahuwah's prophecy by a letter where he said spiritual? That's a lie. And it's one of the big lies that a lot of the Gentile churches, a lot of Christianity believe. That's how they feel included. All right. Anybody want to add to this one?
Yes. I want to show you another scripture. This one is in Revelation. It's in Revelation 21 and verse 3. Revelation 21 and verse 3. Listen to how this is read. It says, "And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he will tabernacle with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them, and be their Elohim." So this verse has been taken when it says, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men. They assume that it's with anyone that believes. But this is the same verse that's written in Ezekiel. It's saying the same thing, that the tabernacle, the tabernacle is with Yisrael, and that he's going to tabernacle with them, and that they shall be his people, Yisrael. This is Revelation 21, verse 3. Right? And when it says Elohim, verse 4, shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Who is this referring to? The world? No. See, this is very contrary to Christian theology, which is why when they hear it, there are strongholds in their mind that they'll have to come against to be able to even see this. They will have to pull down the walls of Jericho in their mind that prevents the truth from entering. Those walls will have to be destroyed, right? In their mind, for them to be able to see that Ezekiel 37 is Revelation 21:3. I just wanted to highlight that, Brother Andrew.
All right, that is a great point. I love that. That's perfect. You're right. It's almost word for word. So Does Yah lie and changes his mind? He's never been like that. What does Malachi say? Book of Malachi says he does not change.
Mm-hmm. I change not.
So we know that
Mm-hmm.
he changes not. So if he said it in Ezekiel, he meant it in Revelation the same way.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we thank you all for joining the House of Shiloh Ministries with part 19 of What is the Truth. We're going to continue in 20 in the same direction, speaking to probably going to the book of Joel next. So please tune in, and we thank you once again for joining us on Shabbat. We're looking forward to speaking and enjoying your presence in the next week. Shalom, everyone.
And also, I'd like to remind our listeners, especially if any of you are of the Christian persuasion, all of us started out that way. We started out in Christianity too. All we ask is that before that knee-jerk reaction takes place, is to just look to see if what is being said is true before rejecting it. Because the scripture says you have rejected truth. It didn't say the truth didn't come to you. It says that you rejected it. So we ask that you will be a good Berean and do what they did. Search the scriptures daily and to see if these things that we say be true. With that, we say shalom to those who are online, those who are present, and those who will watch our videos in the very near future. Shalom.